It was one of those nights when silence filled the house, and the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. My son had already brushed his teeth and slipped into bed, and I was sitting at the edge of his room, gently tucking the blanket under his chin the way I always did. These moments were the ones I treasured most, the kind that reminded me why I tried so hard every single day to keep our family together. He looked at me with his sleepy eyes, the kind of gaze that made me feel both strong and fragile at once. He had always been close to me, more open than most children his age, and his innocent words often carried a weight I could never ignore. That night, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. It felt like just another end to a long day, a routine that made life feel stable, predictable, safe. I remember glancing toward the door, hearing my husband's footsteps pacing in the living room. He had been working late more often these days, glued to his phone, answering messages with the kind of urgency I hadn't seen in years. I brushed off the thought, telling myself it was just stress, maybe deadlines piling up. Still, somewhere deep inside, a tiny ache tugged at me, though I kept it buried beneath the comfort of seeing my son drift into sleep. His small hand reached out, grabbing mine tightly, as though he wanted me to linger a little longer. I smiled, leaned closer, and whispered that everything was fine, that he should rest because tomorrow would be another busy day. But children have a way of cutting through silence, of breaking through masks without even knowing what they've done. Just when I thought he had closed his eyes for good, he shifted slightly and whispered something that made my heart skip. His voice was soft, almost uncertain, but the words carried a sharpness that pierced right through me. I froze, blinking, unsure if I had heard him correctly. My son's late-night words were not the kind of innocent murmur I was used to. They carried a tone of observation, as though he had seen something I hadn't, as though he had noticed cracks in the world I thought was unbreakable. I squeezed his hand gently, forcing a smile to hide the sudden rush of unease that flooded me. He looked at me as though waiting for reassurance, and I nodded quickly, telling him to close his eyes, to sleep peacefully. But inside, my mind was racing. It wasn't the kind of thing a child would invent on his own. It wasn't something he could have misunderstood. The detail, the timing, the way he said it, it lodged itself in my chest like a stone, heavy and impossible to ignore. I kissed his forehead, pulled the blanket up, and whispered good night, but the calmness I tried to project was only for him. The moment I stepped away, I felt the weight of his words sink deeper. As I closed the door behind me, the world that had felt so steady just moments ago now seemed fragile, trembling under the surface. The sound of my husband's laughter from the other room suddenly felt different, layered with a meaning I couldn't quite place. My son's words echoed in my head, refusing to fade. I wanted to push them away, to dismiss them as childish confusion, but they lingered, sharp and haunting, leaving me to wonder if the life I believed was whole had already begun to unravel. That night, long after my son drifted into dreams, I lay awake, replaying his voice in my mind, each repetition cutting deeper, leaving me with questions I wasn't ready to face but knew I could never escape. I lay awake for what felt like hours, unable to push away the unease pressing against my chest. The night had become heavy, and every tick of the clock seemed louder, sharper. I wanted to convince myself that my son's words meant nothing, that it was just the way children sometimes mix up things they hear or see. But the way he whispered them, with such clarity, with that innocent honesty children have when they don't know the weight of their words, it was impossible to forget. I could still hear his little voice, soft but certain, like a truth I wasn't ready to accept. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was overthinking. Yet when I looked at my husband across the breakfast table, a strange discomfort settled between us. He was scrolling through his phone again, half listening, half nodding, smiling at something on the screen that wasn't shared with me. When I asked what he was looking at, he casually said it was work. His tone was relaxed, almost too relaxed, the kind of answer meant to end a conversation quickly. I nodded, pretending not to notice, but inside, my son's late-night confession came back to me with piercing clarity. "Mom, why does Dad always talk to that lady on the phone when you're not around?" I remember the exact way my son had said it. No hesitation, no malice, just pure curiosity. He didn't even understand the meaning behind it, but I did. And that was enough to leave me spiraling. I tried to tell myself maybe it was a colleague, maybe someone from work, but the way he phrased, "always," made my stomach twist. Children don't exaggerate the way adults do. They see things as they are, and they repeat them as they've heard or observed. That thought kept me restless, kept me scanning for answers I wasn't ready to find. Later that evening, I tried to ask my son more casually, like it was nothing. I smiled, brushed his hair back, and asked if he remembered what he told me the night before. He blinked at me, unsure why I was asking, and repeated it in the same innocent way. He added something that made me pause: how Dad sometimes stepped outside to take calls, and once, he even said a name my son repeated without hesitation. It was not a name I recognized. Not a colleague, not a family friend, someone else. I felt my throat tighten, a hollow ache spreading in my chest. I laughed softly, pretending it was nothing, telling him maybe he misheard, maybe it was just a friend. He nodded, satisfied with the reassurance, and ran off to play. But I stayed frozen, my mind unraveling. Every detail suddenly mattered. The late nights, the sudden secretive habits, the moments of distraction, the distance I had felt but refused to acknowledge. Now, through my son's words, they all seemed to connect in ways I wished they didn't. That night, when my husband came to bed later than usual, I lay still, pretending to be asleep. His phone buzzed once, twice, and though he silenced it quickly, I caught the faintest glow of the screen against the wall. My heart pounded, but I didn't move. I stayed silent, suffocating in the questions I couldn't ask. My son's innocent whisper replayed again, cutting through the silence, reminding me of the possibility I wanted to deny. By the time he drifted off beside me, breathing evenly as though nothing was wrong, I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling. A storm of thoughts raged inside me. Was it true? Was my marriage just an illusion I had been blindly protecting? I pressed my lips together, forcing back the tears, but the truth was already creeping into my bones. My son's voice had lit a spark of doubt I couldn't extinguish. And once doubt takes root, it doesn't let go. The following days blurred together, each one heavier than the last. My son's words clung to me like shadows, refusing to fade no matter how much I tried to distract myself. I began noticing things I had never allowed myself to see before, tiny details that suddenly felt impossible to ignore. My husband's phone never left his side anymore. Even when he went to the bathroom, it went with him. Once, that might have seemed normal, but now it carried a different weight. The way he tilted the screen away from me, the way he silenced notifications as soon as they appeared, everything seemed like a clue, a piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. At dinner, he looked distracted, chewing slowly while his eyes drifted to the glowing screen beside his plate. When I asked about his day, his answers were short, vague, the kind of replies meant to close the door on conversation. I smiled, nodded, and pretended not to notice the shift, but inside, every vague answer chipped away at the foundation I had built my life upon. I found myself studying him in ways I never had before. His tone when he spoke, the quick glances he made at his phone, the sudden softness in his voice when he thought I wasn't listening. One night, when he stepped into the shower, I held his phone in my hand for the first time. My palms were sweating, my heart racing so fast I thought I might faint. It was locked, of course. He had changed the password, something he had never bothered with before. That small discovery was enough to send a sharp sting through me. He didn't need to say anything, the lock itself was louder than any confession. I set it back down exactly where I found it, but I knew then that something had shifted between us, something unspoken but undeniable. My son, innocent as ever, kept adding threads to the web of doubt I was trapped in. He would mention little things casually, like how Dad once dropped him off at school later than usual because he had been talking to his friend outside the car. Or how he once overheard him promising someone he would see them soon. Each detail was small, but together, they formed a picture that haunted me. I started retracing memories, moments from months ago that I had brushed off. The nights he claimed to be working late but came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. The sudden urgency to step outside when his phone rang. The way he smiled at messages in the middle of the night. I had dismissed them as stress, as overthinking, as the result of my own exhaustion. But now, through the lens of my son's words, they all looked different. They all looked like signs I should have seen. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion itself, it was carrying it silently. I couldn't share it with anyone. I couldn't even voice it out loud, because saying it would make it real. Instead, I wore the mask of a devoted wife, laughing when required, cooking meals, keeping the house in order. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside, every smile felt forced, every laugh hollow. My heart was no longer steady, it was a storm, waiting to break. One evening, when he came home later than usual, I hugged him, pressing my cheek against his chest the way I always did. But instead of comfort, all I felt was distance. A faint trace of a scent lingered on his shirt, not mine, not our home. It was the kind of detail only someone searching would notice, but now I was always searching. He kissed the top of my head absent-mindedly, unaware of the silent war raging within me. That night, I sat by the window long after everyone had gone to bed, staring at the dark sky. My son's words echoed again and again, overlapping with the evidence I had gathered quietly. I didn't need a confession. The truth was already there, sitting with me in the silence. And though I hadn't confronted him yet, I knew deep down that my marriage was no longer the same. Something precious had been broken, and I was the only one awake to feel it. Sleep became a stranger to me. Every night I lay in the dark, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me, while my own chest felt heavy with questions I couldn't. Silence. My son's late-night whisper had planted a seed of doubt, and in the silence of the nights that followed, it had grown into something I could no longer control. I watched my husband sleep peacefully, his face calm, almost innocent, and wondered how easily someone could wear a mask so perfectly. By day, he played the role of husband and father, but by night, shadows of another life lingered on him, pieces that didn't belong to me. I never confronted him directly. The words would rise to my lips and die there, swallowed back with the bitter taste of fear. Maybe I was afraid of hearing the truth spoken out loud, afraid of shattering the fragile image I still clung to. Instead, I let silence be my weapon, let distance grow between us without saying a word. I moved through the house like a ghost, present but not whole, always watching, always listening. Every vibration of his phone, every sudden smile, every unexplained late return carved deeper wounds into me. My son noticed the change in me. Children always do. He asked why I looked sad, why I didn't laugh the way I used to, and I told him I was just tired. But in his eyes, I saw the reflection of my own pain. He didn't understand the weight of what he had revealed, but I did. He had unknowingly pulled the curtain back, shown me a side of life I had been blind to. His innocence had forced me to face a reality I didn't want, and for that, I both ached and silently thanked him. The breaking point came one quiet evening. My husband had fallen asleep on the couch, his phone slipping from his hand. For the first time, I didn't hesitate. My fingers reached for it before I could stop myself. The lock was still there, but a notification glowed on the screen long enough for me to see it. Just a single line, a name I didn't recognize, followed by words that tore through me, "I miss you already." I dropped the phone as though it burned, my body trembling, my breath shallow. I didn't need to see more. That one line was enough. Enough to confirm everything I had been fearing, enough to make my son's late-night whisper echo louder than ever. I sat there in the dim light, staring at the man I thought I knew. He stirred slightly, oblivious, unaware of the storm raging just inches away from him. How easy it was for him to rest, to breathe without worry, while I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. I wanted to scream, to shake him awake and demand answers, but instead I stayed still, my silence heavier than any words I could speak. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need to be spoken, it's already written in the spaces between, in the little lies, in the secret smiles, in the phone calls taken just out of earshot. When I finally pulled myself together, I walked to my son's room. He was sleeping soundly, his small hand curled around his blanket. I brushed his hair gently, and in that moment, I realized that it was his words, his innocent observation, that had opened my eyes. It wasn't a fight or a confrontation that revealed the truth, it was the honesty of a child who saw what I refused to see. That night, as I lay in bed beside a man I no longer truly knew, I stared at the ceiling with tears burning my eyes. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing with certainty. The life I thought I had, the marriage I believed in, the love I trusted, all of it had been shattered. And it all began with my son's late-night words, words that would never leave me, words that left me wondering if I had ever really known the man lying peacefully beside me.